Hello everybody and welcome to another Tausken review. Today we'll be taking a look at Disco Elysium, a game that came out of nowhere kind of and surprised me with just how engrossing it was. I had no idea what this game was even coming or what it was, but it surprisingly was pretty enjoyable. At its core, Disco Elysium is a CRPG with a bit of a twist. It does not have combat in the way games like Baldur's Gate, Pillars, and other CRPGs have. Instead, it focuses more on the narrative elements of CRPGs and plays out more like a narrative adventure that you kind of choose your way along. You can still focus or come into contact with combat or confrontations, like sometimes you might have to punch somebody or fight with somebody, but these are all done through the narrative text. And so as a result, it's more of an RPG tabletop feeling experience where there's sort of different dice rolls and stats involved and all of that, rather than, say, just clubbing somebody and having a big battle with different combat spells. As such, you need to come to this game prepared to read. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Characters have voice acting for some lines, and the voice acting, by the way, is fantastic, but you'll oftentimes need to read a ton of different dialogue. Fortunately, though, the writing in Disco Elysium is really good, so it doesn't really matter at all. It's just fantastically well written in a way that's compressed and doesn't feel like it's just doing needless, unnecessary exposition. And all the characters feel like they have just tons of personality to them, and all the writing is done so well that it doesn't even matter that it's just entirely about reading. You begin Disco Elysium like any other CRPG, creating your character. Here, though, you have a pre-chosen background to your character, but you'll be able to choose different stats and abilities. These stats can be things like strength, intelligence, like you would expect in any other game, but they oftentimes are used greatly within the narrative of the game. You can do things like intimidating someone into doing something or telling you something, or you can use your incredible intelligence to solve things. There's a ton of options, so no matter what stats or abilities you choose, you always find something that you can use those for in the actual game. Like you could pull your character's vast knowledge of history from his intelligence, or intimidating someone, as I mentioned before, to do something. You play as a detective sent to solve a murder mystery. Someone's been killed and they've been left hanging from a tree. However, you soon find out that's not everything your character is really about. Your character is a drunkard who has spent the last few days wallowing in their own self-pity instead of solving the case. And that's really a core kind of theme of this game, is you kind of get to define your character to be how you want. You can be a sleazy and corrupt cop shaking people down for bribes and things, or you can drink and drug yourself to incompetence, or you can decide to go clean. There's a ton of different interesting inner monologues that happen throughout the game that will remind you of some of the more deep thinking games like Planescape Torment as you kind of delve into the inner thoughts of your character. Disco Elysium is set in a fictitious universe that has some parallels to our own. It feels sort of like a World War II era setting with some Cold War technology and steampunk-like stuff as well. I was very surprised by just how in-depth and detailed this world is. Each character and location has a vast backstory to it, and that makes everyone and everything feel fleshed out. At the center of the game is really this giant war that happened decades before your character really came about here, and as a result it influenced the people, the cultures, and everything that really you come into contact with. It's also surprisingly political, with themes of capitalism versus socialism versus anarchy and more. It's done in a way that doesn't really feel forced. It's not really trying to talk politics to you. It's very natural, and you can choose yourself to align in different ways. It's really just about kind of showing a depth to this world, and I really loved that. It felt like there was just so much to this world, like it actually was a real place. It's a fairly lengthy game as well, at around 20 hours if you just beeline it for the main story, or around 30 to 50 hours depending on how many side quests you do. And you'll want to do them because they're actually surprisingly pretty fun and not really filler at all. It's a great story to watch unfold overall, but I did have two issues with it. I felt like the ending did not live up to the hype that was being generated throughout the game. And on top of that, it can feel like the game is a bit railroaded at times, and people have described it in the past. Which is strange because the game advertises itself as being this very open-ended game. You're still given a lot of choices, don't get me wrong. You can solve different issues in different ways, but sometimes the game comes to these convergence points where the game converges and forces you to complete a certain skill check to do something, to unlock a new part to the main story, and it can feel a bit forced. If you failed, you're then oftentimes required to go wander around the world doing different side quests to build up so that you can finally actually complete and progress to the next area. This stuff just doesn't really feel right to me. It feels a bit forced. I also felt like the thought system was not the most well designed or intuitive. As you progress throughout the game, you can allocate experience towards unlocking different thoughts. Usually these give you certain bonuses, like unlocking different stats or things, but they can also unlock certain sections of the main story quest. Personally, I felt like the game didn't do the best job at really explaining the system, and as a result, it can feel a bit forced sometimes to do it as part of the main story, but it's just not the most well designed. My final complaint is of the pathfinding, and the actions you can do with your character sometimes feel a bit buggy. There was times where I would click on a location, my character would get stuck, or I would tell them to go talk to somebody, or click on a door to go through to the next zone, and my character would run up to them and then just stare at the door until I would move them away and back onto it again. It's just an annoying bug that seems to happen quite a bit. From a graphical and sound standpoint, Disco Elysium is great. It has exquisite details in the world, and it's a very pleasant game to look at. The graphics are just really good and look very hand carved and hand painted. It's amazing. It has some pretty good background sounds as well for different music that'll play in shops or other sounds from different bustling things going around. It's a pretty great game when it comes to the immersive aspect of the graphics and the sounds. Overall, Disco Elysium was a ton of fun and gets an 8 out of 10. The writing is one of the strongest I've seen in any CRPG in a long time. It's its strongest aspect by far. It's only really held down by some of these bugs and the fact that sometimes the game felt a bit railroaded and the kind of weird ending. Overall, I would highly recommend it though to CRPG fans. I think it's a unique, entirely interesting, narrative-driven experience that was just a ton of fun that you really can't find anywhere else.